Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Carol Sakey speaking. Well, church bells that were ringing in 2009 right across New Zealand. Why were they ringing? It wasn't because of civil defence emergency, it was because of climate alarmism. So, church bells rang for climate alarmism in New Zealand and corporate capture had begun. 23rd of October 2009, the Mornington Methodist Church members were planning to ring their church bells 350 times over an hour. That's quite some church bell ringing. This was just one of 6 Dunedin church bells that would ring to support the 350th day of action. More than 4,000 events were taking place around the world on October the 24th, 2009 to encourage people to reduce their carbon emissions. 600 leaflets were distributed around Dunedin neighbourhoods, 350 Dunedin collective groups, as diverse as school pupils, musicians, artists, cyclists, skateboarders, collaborated on Dunedin's Day of Action to encourage Dunedin residents to reduce their fossil fuels. On the 16th of October 2009, ringing the alarm on climate change, the Anglican Church of Aotearoa church bells tolled up and down New Zealand on Saturday, the 24th of October 2009, and they rang for the 350-day global pointer to cut carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. This was promoted by 3 Anglican bishops. The Auckland Synod resolution was initiated by a diocese climate change action group, the Church Action Group, the Diocese Action Group, of which the convener was Dr. Richard Milne. He was a population health scientist. And Milne said at the time, remind church communities and individuals of the need to live more sustainably, yes, that sustainable word, to reduce their carbon footprint. Then he added, it's particularly important to make the statement before our government enters negotiations at the UN Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen in December. The church gave a link to their website for further information on theology, science, economics, politics, and global climate change. So that was on the Diocese Climate Change Action Group. November 2009, Catholic Bishops' Conference, church leaders urged bolder action on climate change, calling political leaders to strive for a stronger commitment to the international community at the Copenhagen Climate Summit for the stronger commitment of the whole community. So going down to October 2009, following a meeting with the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the church leaders from the Anglican, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist churches and the Salvation Army churches released a statement outlining the environmental and economic impacts of climate change and the importance of immediate action by the whole community. They applauded the steps of the past and the present government and what they have been doing, but they said that this was more urgent and more needs to be done. Catholic Bishop John Drew of Wellington said, the world is perched on the brink of a kairos moment, described as a moment in the scripture that is a moment of opportunity, grace, and truth. So they had really bought into the climate change. He also said that scientists warned the window of opportunity for change is very narrow. Well, this window of opportunity has been, well, it's been repeated time and time again, the term the window of opportunity. So the 14th of September 2022, 13 years later, the WEF, World Economic Forum, reported that the UN announced we have a narrow window of opportunity to create a better future for everyone. As they were talking about the global crisis, lurching from crisis to crisis. All church leaders in New Zealand joined the World Council of Churches as they call for churches throughout New Zealand to ring their bells on 3 p.m. on Sunday the 13th December, midway through the UN summit in Copenhagen, to call people to prayer and action in the face of climate change. Again, it was announced the window of opportunity repeats itself. The UN website, the 20th of March 2023, 14 years later, after the churches in New Zealand announced the narrow window of opportunity. A major UN report referring to the IPCC greenhouse gases, a human-caused climate change, yet another narrow window of opportunity is reported by the UN. Then the 7th of November, again, a high-level meeting at the UN, and the Secretary-General actually reports on the window of opportunity, saying that a window of opportunity remains, but only a narrow shaft of light appears. Again, the IPCC on the 4th of October 2023 did exactly that when they headlined a statement for policymakers worldwide, saying this is a rapidly closing window of opportunity. Then the Climate Home News on the 4th of October 2023, another one. On COP28, the window of opportunity is rapidly closing. 23rd of April 2023, again, has humanity finally broken? However, a tiny window of opportunity remains open to tackle climate change. Do you get what I'm saying? Red flags should be flying. So I personally believe it's about the destruction of the global free market enterprise economy, the exploitation of corporate multi-stakeholderism of sovereign states worldwide, the implanting of destroying nation states. Of course, nation states would be a pain in the butt to globalization. It's all about global citizenship. Children in schools are being taught to be good global citizens, not good New Zealand citizens. So this window of opportunity and multi-stakeholder corporations, the corporate capture of the World Economic Forum, the massive transformation of populations throughout the world, the WEF Great Reset, the capitalist marketplace that is characterized by the dominance of hierarchical bureaucratic corporations. As Schwab announced to the world, time for a great reset on the 3rd of June 2020, as he referred to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And he said this is an opportunity to build more sustainable systems, people, planet, and heaps of profit for the self-interested corporations. A very wealthy profit at that. The Austrian Institute reported on the 2nd of June 2020 the narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. We need a better capitalisation, a better capitalism, namely corporate capitalism, corporate capture. The Globe and Mail reported it's time for a massive reset of capitalism, 3rd of June 2020. You see where this is going, the corporate capitalism. The pandemic represents a rare but a narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimaginings, reset our world. Not our world, their world. But see the terms that are used time and time again. Harvard Business School, their business review, Making Stakeholder Capitalism a Reality, 22nd of January 2020. This was spurred by the talk about climate change, financing and investing, as they report that Larry Fink, BlackRock, the world's largest investor with $7 trillion in asset management, as his CEOs receive an annual letter placing long-term sustainability at the center of his investment approach. At the same time as the World Economic Forum kicks off the week with updating their manifesto, which they hadn't updated since 1973. As they said, business must be the stewards of the environment, global supply chains, referring to sustainable shareholders. 19th of June 2019, 6 months prior to the global pandemic. What happens? 13th of June 2019, the World Economic Forum and the UN signed an official partnership memorandum. The WEF, the representatives of the corporation, becomes the whisperer in the ears of the UN. Corporate capture worldwide. International laws by the UN and corporates represented by the WEF. This enabling a one world corporate captured governance. So in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic, transnational corporations sought to cement the control of global governance, ensuring that they served their own best interests, the interests of large businesses and corporations, for a very, very wealthy profit. Thank you. Wealthy profit rather than the well-being of humanity. So we have transnational corporations directly responsible for many of the global crises we face as we view corporate capture in various forums throughout the world. This is a governance, the evolution of parallel privatized multilateralism made up of a myriad of multi-stakeholder bodies. Corporate capture worldwide. With the WEF, the World Economic Forum, developed and pushed for this privatization of a global governance for well over a decade. The Great Reset. That's just part and the push towards a corporate takeover of global institutions, such as the UN and international organizations, bodies that take critical decisions over the governance of global common goods, such as food, water, health, internet, and other important things in life. Everything we need to survive, they are taking over that. That's the idea, to squash sovereign nations, destroy them. because sovereign nations are a pain in the butt to globalisation. So we have civil society groups in 2021 produced an open letter opposing plans for big tech-dominated body for a global digital governance. Again, transnational corporations. As for churches supporting ringing the bells throughout New Zealand, many have stated that Christians have a particular duty to address the moral and human implications of climate change. But the Pope declared heavy criticism of climate deniers and delayers. He called them skeptics and irresponsible. Then you have George Pell from Australia. He saw climate science as a dangerous religious dogma. This was reported in The Guardian on the 13th of January 2023. They said that Cardinal George Pell left a legacy of climate science denial, which meant in his later years he became more distant from the Catholic Church. Pell, for decades, in newspaper columns and speeches, popularised climate denialism, dismissal of global heating, and branded environmentalists as hysterical and in the grip of pseudo-religion. In one of the 2011 interviews with the Catholic media, Pell said, "In the past, pagans sacrificed animals and even humans in vain attempts to placate capricious and cruel gods. Today, they demand a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions." Pell often announced that climate change was mostly natural and that science is not settled. Professor Tim Stevens, an international environmental law expert, wrote, "Pell was prolific, wrote many climate denial pieces. He said that Pell was caught up in the right-wing cultural view of climate change being a hoax or conspiracy." Cardinal Pell died when he was 81, and he used his position as Australia's most senior Catholic to forcibly reject the climate crisis, The Guardian reported. On the eve of the Paris Climate Conference in 2015, the former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, publicly challenged Pell, as Cardinal Pell was climbing the ranks of seniority in the Vatican. Rudd said it was no small matter that Pell was muddying the ethical waters with his radical climate skepticism. But this didn't stop Cardinal Pell. He still carried on down this road, and when he spoke out, of course, he was character assassinated. They tried to stop him from speaking out. And, any public debate was shut down. And same thing that's happening to real scientists now who try to speak out. They are shut down. Anyone who wants to talk publicly about climate, natural climate, volcanoes, and the CO2 is good for plants. You don't hear any of that. People are shut down. Time for open discussion for this. However, Pope Francis in 2015 released his encyclical on the environment, calling for global action on climate change to mitigate the risk of serious consequences for ecosystems and humanity. Forbes reported on the 9th of December 2020 that Pope Francis, with his corporate titans, were to make capitalism more fair. Corporations to be holier than thou, because now they have the Pope on their side. So Pope Francis virtually signalling to global populations worldwide. As he ignored the rest of society, he jumped on the bandwagon of Lady Lynn de Forester Rothschild's corporate bandwagon. Yes, the Pope spoke about those hundreds of millions of people in extreme poverty. He talked the talk, but didn't walk the walk. So Pope Francis, the Vatican, partnered with Rothschild's Council for Inclusive Capitalism that boasts over 10.5 trillion in assets under management. Companies with more than 2.1 trillion of market capitalization and 200 million workers in over 163 countries. Members of the Council for the Inclusive Capitalism, calling themselves guardians, these are top CEOs of corporations that include MasterCard, Salesforce, DuPont, Rothschild's Inclusive Capital Partners, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, BP, Bank of America, Rockefeller Foundation. These are just some of the most wealthiest there are in the world. So the wealthiest elite, also the key players of the World Economic Forum, the corporate capture of the world, corporate governance, digital governance, a one world governance to control all populations worldwide. Those church bells that tolled up and down New Zealand in 2009 should have been ringing for corporate alarmism, warning the people of New Zealand of what was to come: communist degrowth, destruction of democracy, democratic states, totalitarianism, authoritism. How the government would demand mandates of jabs in arms, people being guinea pigs to clinical trials. That should have been the warning of those church bells of what was to come. So what we're talking about is the loss of the free market enterprise economy worldwide, the freedom to choose, replacing this for a stakeholder capitalism of the WEF, the UN, where your freedom is at stake, your freedom to choose is at stake. Today we have eco-churches in New Zealand that are funded by local government, Auckland Council website where the WEF data is used to put data on the council website for all Aucklanders, people across New Zealand to read, as if it's the truth, the evidence, putting it out there. So earlier this year, I emailed the main churches in New Zealand, the leaders of main churches in New Zealand, requesting that they have a day of prayer for the jab injured, those who died from the jab. What did I get? What answer did I get back? Zilch. Absolutely zilch. But they rang the bells for climate alarmism, and they still go down that road of promoting climate alarmism, where in Britain, vulnerable people and children are suffering a mental disablement called eco-alarmism, giving children and vulnerable people nightmares. It's a psychological disability. And this is what's happening, and it's happening more than in just England. What is happening in New Zealand? We don't hear about this. So we have the World Council of Churches that have collaborated with governments, authorities on mandatory COVID jabs, on climate alarmism, the churches in New Zealand being part of the World Council of Churches, all going down this road. What has happened with the churches that used to care about humanity? Where have they gone? Because what I see right here is not caring churches. I see Marxism in churches, the jabbed, the unjabbed, those that believe climate alarmism, those that don't, those that promote the government's narratives and those that don't, those that promote the UN and those that don't. Marxism, 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 communist degrowth. Wake up, New Zealand.